March 29th, 1461. A plateau in North Yorkshire flat, open, brutal, 30,000 archers. Maybe more. No one knows the exact count because no one stopped to take a census when the snow started falling and the wind began to scream. What we do know, two massive armies, 50, 60, maybe 70,000 men combined facing each other across a stretch of frozen farmland near a place called Towton, and one side had a plan that would turn empty air into a meat grinder. You're standing in that line. Your bow is taller than you are. 6 feet of yew wood that takes 150 pounds of force just to draw. Your fingers are cracked and bleeding from the cold. 60 arrows in your belt, maybe 72 if you're lucky. Across that plateau, an army that outnumbers you. Heavy cavalry that could crush your skull with a warhorse's hoof. Knights in full plate armor who've been training for war since they could walk. Men-at-arms with poleaxes designed specifically to crack open anything that breathes. How do you win this? How do you turn nothing, absolutely nothing, into a fortress? The impossible calculation. Here's the math that shouldn't work. You have maybe 10 seconds before they close the distance. Once they're on top of you, your bow becomes a stick. Useless. You're dead. So what do you do when the enemy has more men, better armor, and the momentum? You change the rules. You make the ground itself fight for you. The wind hack. Lord Fauconberg saw it first. The wind was howling south straight into the enemy's face. A blizzard wind. The kind that makes your eyes water and your breath freeze in your throat. And he realized something unbelievable. Something that would turn an open killing field into a designed trap. The wind wasn't a problem. It was a weapon. Here's what happened next, and this is documented. This is real. Fauconberg ordered his archers forward. Just a few steps. Enough to get closer to the enemy line. They drew. 30,000 bows creaking in unison. And they loosed. The first volley. Imagine this. Tens of thousands of arrows, bodkin points, broad heads, barbed tips all launched at once. But here's the twist. The wind catches them. Pushes them. Carries them an extra 50, 60, maybe 70 yards beyond their normal range. The enemy sees a black cloud rising. They brace for impact. And then the sky falls. Arrows don't just wound. At that velocity, with that weight, they punch through mail. They find the gaps in plate armor. They hit horses in the eyes, the chest, the legs. They create chaos. Men go down. Horses scream. Formations buckle. But the enemy has archers too. Thousands of them. So they return fire. They draw. They loose. They send their own volley back. And here's where the trap snaps shut. Their arrows are flying into the wind. Same bows, same draw weight, same arrows. But the wind rips the range away from them. Their shots peak early, drop short, land in the snow and mud dozens of yards in front of Fauconberg's line. Harmless. The step back. Fauconberg's archers don't celebrate. They don't cheer. They step back, calmly, methodically, back to their original position, and they draw again. Because now the enemy has a problem that has no good answer. They can't shoot back effectively. The wind won't let them. They can't stay where they are, because Fauconberg's archers are going to keep shooting. Volley after volley after volley. 6 arrows per minuto per man. Sustained. Relentless. Do the math. 30,000 archers. 6 arrows per minute. That's 180,000 projectiles every 60 seconds, even if half of them miss. Even if half of those hit shields or glance off armor. You're still talking about tens of thousands of lethal impacts over the span of minutes. The enemy is losing men, losing horses, losing cohesion, and they haven't even moved yet. The choice. So what do you do? You're the commander on the receiving end of this nightmare. Option 1, stand and take it. Let your army get shredded by arrows you can't effectively return. Watch your formations dissolve as men drop and panic spreads. Option 2, advance. Close the distance. Get into melee range where your superior numbers and heavy cavalry can do work. But here's the catch. If you advance, you're walking into the beaten zone. The beaten zone. This is the key. This is the moment where open terrain becomes a killing zone. Beaten zone isn't about precision. It's not about one archer picking off one target. It's about mass fire creating a space where nothing survives. On open ground, flat, unobstructed farmland, with nowhere to hide arrows, don't need to be accurate. They just need to be numerous. You aim at a formation. Hundreds of archers aim at the same formation. You create a dense impact area, a zone where the air itself is lethal. And when the enemy advances into that zone, they bunch up, they slow down, they raise shields and lose mobility, which makes them easier targets, which means more hits, which means more casualties, which means more panic. The zone feeds itself. But wait, there's more. And this is where the tactical genius becomes almost supernatural. Remember those enemy arrows that fell short? The ones that landed in the snow, dozens of yards in front of Falkenberg's line. They're not wasted. They're ammunition. Falkenberg's archers advance again, just a few steps, enough to reach the arrows stuck in the frozen ground. They pull them out. They add them to their own supply, and they shoot them back. Think about what's happening here. The enemy just donated thousands, maybe tens of thousands of arrows to the side that's already winning the exchange. They've armed their opponents. They've extended the beating their own army is taking. And they can't stop it, because if they stop shooting, Falkenberg's archers just keep shooting anyway. If they keep shooting, they're literally handing over more ammo. It's a perfect trap. A tactical checkmate that happens in the opening minutes of the battle. The forced march. So the enemy does the only thing they can do. They advance. Thousands of men, heavy infantry, cavalry, knights in full harness. They start marching across that open plateau, into the wind, into the snow, into a storm of arrows that doesn't stop. And here's what that looks like. Every step forward, men are falling. Not one at a time, in clusters, in waves. An arrow hits a man in the thigh. He goes down. The man behind him trips over him. Both are now on the ground. Both are easier targets. A horse takes an arrow to the chest. It rears, throws its rider, crashes into the formation beside it, creates a gap. Archers see the gap. Focus fire on the gap. Shields come up, but shields are heavy. Arms get tired. A shield drops for just a second, just 1 second, and that's when the arrow finds you. You're not fighting an enemy. You're fighting space itself. Every yard of ground you cross costs lives, costs cohesion, costs momentum. And the archers? They're still shooting, still stepping back when you get close, still maintaining that lethal distance. The open terrain, the thing that should have been neutral ground, fair ground, has become a weapon that only works in one direction. The reality check. Okay, pause. You've heard the legend, right? 1 million arrows at Towton. It's in pop history books. It's in documentaries. It's a number that gets thrown around like it's fact. Here's the truth. That number is speculation. Pure calculation based on assumptions. Some historian sat down and said, if half the army were archers, and if they all shot at maximum rate, and if the fight lasted this long, then maybe you get close to 1 million. But real scholars, they call that shaky. The sources don't give us a clean count. Medieval chroniclers didn't stand there with clipboards tallying every arrow loosed. So why does the number matter? Because even if you cut it in half, even if you say 500,000 arrows, the effect is real. Even if you cut it in half again, 250,000, the effect is still devastating. Here's what we can prove. Archaeological work at Towton has recovered over 150 arrowheads from metal detector surveys. And that's just what survives in the ground after 560 plus years. Most arrows rotted away. Most were picked up after the battle for reuse. But the assemblages that remain, they support the idea that missile fire was massive, dominant, the defining feature of the battle's opening phase. We also know this. A trained longbowman carried somewhere between 60 and 72 arrows. That's documented in supply records, in training manuals, in archaeological finds from other battles. We know sustained maximum rate of fire is around 6 arrows per minute, not the 10 or 12 you see in movies. Real archers get tired. Draw weight matters, technique matters, but 6 per minute, sustained, across thousands of men, that's still an unholy amount of steel falling from the sky. The numbers that matter. Let's be conservative. Let's say 20,000 archers on the Yorkist side, not 30, 20, 6 arrows per minute, 10 minutes of sustained shooting before the lines close. That's 1,200,000 arrows, and that's the low estimate. Now imagine you're on the receiving end of that. Imagine standing in formation, knowing that every second 200,000 projectiles are arcing toward you. You can't see them all, you can't track them. You just hear the sound, a sound that witnesses described as thunder, as hail, as the roar of a waterfall, and then impacts. All around you, men screaming, horses collapsing, metal ringing against metal, shafts snapping, blood in the snow. For 10 minutes straight. Would you advance? Could you? The design. This is the moment where you realize what's really happening. Towton isn't a battle, it's a designed space. Falkenberg didn't just position his archers and hope for the best. He turned an open plateau place with no natural defenses, no walls, no ditches, no high ground into a machine. Every element works together. The wind extends his range and shortens the enemy's. The step forward, step back timing wastes enemy ammunition while preserving his own. The beaten zone channels the enemy advance into predictable lanes where mass fire is most effective. The ammo recovery extends his shooting phase beyond what should be possible. And behind the archers, men-at-arms, heavy infantry with poleaxes and swords. A stop line, a barrier that says, the archers can fall back, but you can't push through. It's layered, it's redundant, it's brilliant, and it works because the terrain is open. Here's the thing that breaks your brain. Open terrain should favor the attacker. That's basic military doctrine. That's what every commander since Alexander the Great understood. Flat ground means cavalry can charge, means heavy infantry can form up and push, means you can bring your numbers to bear and overwhelm a smaller force through sheer mass. Except at Towton, it doesn't work that way. At Towton, the open ground becomes a cage, because you can see everything, which means the archers can see everything. There's nowhere to hide, no trees to duck behind, no hills to use as cover, no dead ground where you can advance unseen. Every step you take is visible, targetable, lethal. The same terrain that should give you freedom of movement becomes a prison where the walls are made of arrows. The psychological break. Let's talk about what this does to your mind. You're a soldier. You've trained for combat. You know how to hold a line. You know how to take an order and execute it. But this is different. In normal combat, you face an enemy you can reach. You can see their faces. You can swing a weapon and fight back. There's a logic to it, a fairness, even in the brutality. But standing under arrow fire, you can't fight back. You can't do anything except stand there and hope the next one doesn't have your name on it. It's random. It's impersonal. It's death falling from the sky with no warning, no pattern, no way to defend yourself beyond lifting a shield and praying. And it goes on, and on, and on. Minute after minute, men beside you go down, men in front of you, men behind you. The screaming doesn't stop, the impacts don't stop, the blood in the snow doesn't stop spreading. At what point do you break? At what point does your formation disciplined, professional, trained just dissolve because human beings can't take it anymore? They advance, but they don't break. Not yet, because they're professionals too, because their commanders are shouting orders, because the only way out is forward, so they march into the beaten zone, into the kill box that Falkenberg designed, and every yard they cover, the casualties mount. Here's what modern analysis shows. In the opening phase of Towton, before the lines even meet, casualties could have reached the thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Not speculation, not exaggeration. Bodies piled up so thick that later in the battle, men were climbing over corpses to reach the enemy. The snow turned red. The contemporary accounts say the blood ran into a nearby stream and turned the water crimson for hours. This is what a killing zone does. The pattern, and here's the terrifying part, this isn't unique to Towton. This is a system. The English used this tactic again and again throughout the 100 Years' War. Crécy, 1346, English archers on a slope, French knights charging across open ground. Accounts talk about arrow expenditure in the hundreds of thousands, possibly more. The French charge breaks. Repeatedly. Knights in full armor, the most expensive, most elite fighting force in Europe, shredded by men with wooden bows. Agincourt, 1415. Narrow field, muddy ground. English archers on the flanks. French advance into a bottleneck where mass fire turns them into a choke point of dying men and screaming horses. The pattern is always the same. Force the enemy to advance across open ground or predictable lanes. Use terrain, weather, or positioning to give your archers a range advantage. Create a beaten zone through mass fire. Precision doesn't matter, volume does. Maintain a stop line behind the archers so they can fall back safely when the enemy gets close. It's repeatable, it's teachable, it's a doctrine, and at Towton, it reaches its peak, the tipping point. So when does it end? When do the lines finally meet? The sources vary, but the estimates suggest the arrow storm lasted somewhere between 10 and 30 minutes. 10 to 30 minutes of sustained, mass archery. Think about that. In modern combat, a firefight lasting 30 minutes is considered intense, extended, grueling. But those are rifles, machine guns, weapons that require a trigger pull. This is bows. Every single arrow requires reaching into your quiver, knocking the arrow, drawing 150 pounds of tension, aiming even roughly, releasing, recovering, repeating, 6 times per minute, for 30 minutes. Your shoulders are burning, your fingers are shredded, your arms feel like lead, and you keep shooting, because if you stop, the enemy wins. The breaking point. Finally, the enemy reaches the Yorkist line. What's left of them? They've lost thousands in the advance. Their formations are shattered, their momentum is gone. They're exhausted, traumatized, bleeding. But they're there. And now, it's melee. Axes against swords. Polearms against shields. Men grappling in the snow and mud, slipping on blood and bodies. The archers fall back. They've done their job. Now it's time for the men-at-arms to finish it. But here's the thing. The battle is already decided. Not because of the melee, not because of superior swordsmanship or tactics in close combat, but because the killing zone already broke the enemy's back. They arrive at the Yorkist line as a wounded, disorganized mob, not an army. And when you're fighting from a position of strength against an enemy who's already half dead, you win. The body count. Towton is one of the bloodiest battles ever fought on English soil. Estimates of the dead range from 9,000 to 28,000. 28,000 in a single day. On a snow-covered plateau in Yorkshire, mass graves found near the battlefield support these numbers. Archaeological excavations have uncovered remains showing trauma consistent with arrow wounds, blunt force trauma, bladed weapons. One grave alone contained 37 bodies. 37 men who woke up that morning, ate breakfast, checked their equipment, and marched onto a plateau they'd never leave. This is what happens when open terrain becomes a killing zone. So what did we just witness? What's the actual takeaway from 30,000 archers turning a flat plateau into a death trap? It's this: terrain isn't just what's there, it's what you make it. A hill is only high ground if you use it correctly. A river is only a barrier if you force the enemy to cross it at the wrong time. A forest is only cover if you know how to fight in it. And an open field is only empty space if you don't know how to fill it with death. Falkenberg understood something that most commanders miss. The battlefield itself is a weapon, not the swords, not the bars, not even the men. The space between armies is where the killing happens. And if you control that space, if you make it impossible to cross without bleeding, you've already won. The blueprint. Let's break down the system one more time, because this isn't just history. This is a tactical blueprint that shows up across centuries, across cultures, across completely different technologies. Step 1. Identify the advantage. At Towton, it was wind. At other battles, it might be high ground, or a choke point, or superior range, or better intel. Find the one thing that gives you an edge. Doesn't have to be big, just has to be real. Step 2. Exploit asymmetry. Wind-backed arrows fly farther. That's physics. That's not negotiable. So you use it. You force exchanges where your weapons work and theirs don't. You make the math favor you. Step 3. Create the trap. The beaten zone isn't an accident. It's a designed space. You position your forces so that the enemy's only options are bad and worse. Stand still and die slowly, or advance and die quickly. Either way, they're dying. Step 4. Resource denial. The hammer trap. The enemy shoots, misses, and hands you their arrows. This is force multiplication. This is turning the enemy's actions against them. In modern warfare, it's called asymmetric advantage. In medieval warfare, it's just called smart. Step 5. Have a fallback. The archers aren't heroes. They're not standing their ground against a cavalry charge. They shoot, They fall back. They let the men-at-arms finish the job. Because the killing zone doesn't have to destroy the enemy completely. It just has to break them enough that someone else can finish it. The comparative. Want to see how universal this is? Cavalry, 53 BC. Roman legions heavy infantry, disciplined, professional marching across open desert in Mesopotamia. They're facing Parthian horse archers. Light cavalry with composite bows. The Romans should win. They outnumber the Parthians. They have better armor. They're Rome. Except the Parthians do something impossible. They refuse to close. They circle. They shoot. They retreat when the Romans advance. They shoot again. For hours, the Romans can't catch them, can't close distance, can't bring their infantry to bear. And the arrows don't stop. Parthian bows have incredible range. Their cavalry is mobile. And here's the kicker. They have a camel train behind them carrying thousands of extra arrows. No ammo trap necessari. They've got supply lines. The beaten zone is the entire battlefield. The Romans break. Rout, gets slaughtered in the desert. 20,000 dead, another 10,000 captured. One of Rome's worst defeats in history. Same principle as Towton. Different continent, different century, different weapons. Open terrain becomes a killing zone when you control the range and refuse to let the enemy dictate the engagement. The evolution. Fast forward to 1415. Agincourt, English longbowmen again. This time against French knights in a muddy field. The French have learned nothing from Crécy, nothing from decades of getting shredded by English archers. They charge anyway, and the killing zone does its work. Mud slows them down. Armor weighs them down. Arrows punch through gaps and weak points. The English are outnumbered maybe 3-1. Doesn't matter. The French lose thousands. The English lose hundreds. Because the battlefield narrow, muddy, predictable becomes the weapon. Here's the thing though, this system has a shelf life. By the late 1500s, firearms start replacing bows. And firearms change everything. Guns don't care about draw weight, don't care about training time, don't care about stamina. Any peasant with a week of training can point a musket and kill a knight. So the age of the archer ends. But the principle? The principle never dies. The modern echo. World War I, 1916. The Somme. British troops ordered to advance across open ground toward German machine gun positions. No cover, no concealment. Just flat terrain and barbed wire. The Germans have range. They have overlapping fields of fire. They've created a beaten zone that stretches for miles. And the British walk into it. 60,000 casualties on the first day. 60,000. It's Towton with machine guns. It's the same tactical nightmare, dressed in different technology. Open terrain, mass fire, predictable lan, no good options. The battlefield becomes the weapon. Vietnam, 1968. Khe Sanh. North Vietnamese forces surround a U.S. Marine base. They shell it, constantly, for months. The Marines can't leave, can't advance, can't do anything except sit in bunkers and take it. Until American air power turns the tables. B-52 strikes. Napalm, artillery. The open ground around Khe Sanh, the approaches the North Vietnamese have to cross becomes a killing zone. Estimated 10,000 to 15,000 North Vietnamese casualties. The Marines hold. Same principle, same system, same brutal math. So let's come back to where we started. March 29th, 1461. You're standing on a frozen plateau with a bow in your hands and an army 3 times your size marching toward you. Everything about this situation screams defeat. You're in the open. No walls, no fortifications, no high ground worth mentioning. The enemy has numbers, has momentum, has heavy cavalry that should roll right over you. By every conventional measure, you should lose. And yet you win. Not through luck, not through divine intervention, not through some last-minute miracle. You win because someone looked at empty space and saw a weapon. You win because someone understood that terrain isn't what you're given, it's what you create. You win because 30,000 archers, firing 6 arrows per minute, can turn air into a wall that armies break against. The defiance, this is what makes Towton unbelievable. Not the tactics, not the technology, not even the body count. It's the audacity. It's the idea that you can take the worst possible position flat, open, exposed and make it work for you. that you can look at a killing field designed to favor the attacker and reverse it. Flip it. Make the attacker the one who bleeds. Military historians call battles like this decisive. They call them turning points. But that's not the right word. The right word is defiant. Because Towton says, the rules don't matter if you rewrite them. Superior numbers don't matter if you never let them close. Better armor doesn't matter if arrows find the gaps. Momentum doesn't matter if you bleed it away one volley at a time. The human element. But let's not forget the men. The archers who stood in the snow for hours, fingers frozen, shoulders screaming, and kept shooting. The soldiers who watched their friends die and kept formation. The commanders who made the calls advance, fall back, hold, knowing that one wrong decision meant death for thousands. These weren't superhumans. They were scared, cold, exhausted. They didn't have technology we can't imagine. They had wood and string and steel. What they had was will, and a system that turned will into mathematics. 6 arrows per minute, times 20,000 men, times 10 minutes. That's not magic, that's discipline, that's training, that's thousands of hours of practice distilled into a few minutes of perfect execution. The impossible victory isn't impossible because the tactics are supernatural. It's impossible because executing those tactics under those conditions, in a blizzard, under pressure, with your life on the line, requires a level of human performance that shouldn't be sustainable. But they sustained it, for 10 minutes, maybe 30, long enough to shred an army, long enough to turn a plateau into a graveyard. The myth and the truth, 1 million arrows. Maybe that number is real, maybe it's exaggerated, maybe it's half that, or a quarter, doesn't matter. Because even at a fraction of the legendary numbers, the effect is undeniable. The archaeological evidence is there. The arrowheads in the ground, the mass graves, the contemporary accounts describing a sky darkened by missiles. The mathematics support it. The tactical records support it. The outcome supports it. Towton was one of the bloodiest battles in English history. 28,000 dead in a single day. You don't get numbers like that from swords alone. You get them from a system that turns space into death, the final word. So here's what we learned. Walls are optional. Fortifications are optional. High ground is optional. What's not optional is understanding the physics of violence, understanding that range is a weapon, that asymmetry is a weapon, that time and space and weather and terrain are all weapons if you know how to use them. Falkenberg didn't have artillery, didn't have air support, didn't have drones or guided missiles or any of the technology that modern armies take for granted. He had bows and wind, and the knowledge that if you make the enemy come to you and you control what happens in between, you can turn nothing into everything. The open plateau near Towton wasn't a fortress. It was better than a fortress, because a fortress can be besieged, can be surrounded, can be starved out. But a killing zone? A killing zone is only limited by how much ammunition you have and how long your enemy is willing to walk into it. And at Towton, on March 29th, 1461, the enemy walked into it until they broke, until the snow was red, until the bodies were piled so high that men climbed over them to keep fighting, until an army that should have won learned the hard way that open terrain isn't neutral ground. It's whatever the archers say it is. The legacy. 564 years later, we're still talking about it, still analyzing it, still trying to understand how 30,000 men with wooden bows accomplished something that seems impossible. But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the question isn't, how did they do it? Maybe it's, what does it take to turn the impossible into the inevitable? And the answer is simple. Vision, discipline, execution. See the weapon no one else sees. Build the trap no one else anticipates. And when the enemy walks into it, don't hesitate, don't flinch, don't stop. Pour everything you have into that moment. 6 arrows per minute. For as long as it takes. Until the sky itself becomes a wall. Until the air becomes a blade. Until the open plateau, the place where you should have died, becomes the place where your enemy learns what it means to face an army that turned nothing into everything. They didn't need walls. They used the sky, and the sky was enough.